Recently, the West Virginia legislature passed and Governor Patrick Morrisey signed legislation that will significantly benefit racing and breeding in West Virginia. Wanted to know a little bit more about that. Thought, who better to reach out to than someone who is part of one of the most prominent breeding families in West Virginia and also a state delegate. Coming up next on Charlestown Races Today, part of the Midlantic Racing Today family podcast, powered by the Racing Biz, theracingbiz.com, and presented by our friends at Charlestown Races. Delegate Joe Funkhouser joins me. Joe, good morning. Thanks for joining me here on Charlestown Races Today. Really productive couple of sessions for you in your first term as a delegate up in Charleston.
Well, good morning, Frank. Thank you for having me. And I definitely that's been one of the focal points and significant industries in Jefferson County, of roughly 5,000 jobs or so, directly and indirectly, and me being grew up on a thoroughbred farm, one of West Virginia's, I think it's West Virginia's oldest breeding farm that continues in operation. My grandfather and great grandfather started at Sullivan Farms in 1939.
Yeah, what is it? Fourth generation now? I guess it is, right? Great grandfather,
Yes.
grandfather,
Yep.
Father, you guys.
And I live just next to the farm, and my brother manages the farm, and my mom's across the street there. And my late father, Randy, was the president of the HPPA for many years. Actually, my grandmother, Ruth, her and the late John McKee started the West Virginia Thoroughbred Breeders Association. I think it was in the early 80s or the late 70s.
Wow. Okay. So Funkhouser's everywhere you look in the history of West Virginia thoroughbred racing. Let's talk about this bill here. It's SB 1060 is what finally passed. Give us kind of the lowdown on what this is going to do for the thoroughbred industry.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd just like to, thank. It was a team effort down there. Senator Jason Barrett was the lead sponsor in the Senate. He's also my senator. He represents the 16th district along with Patricia Rucker. They were both pivotal in getting this through the Senate, along with Senator Tom Willis and Darren Thorne, who represents the 15th district over there, the other half of Berkeley County, and then Morgan and Hampshire County. But it was a team effort as well with our colleagues in the Northern Panhandle, particularly Pat McGeehan, who's the majority leader, number 2 in the House, who represents Hancock County, where Mountaineer is. The Mountaineer racetrack and casino is in Hancock County in Pat's district. And then we have 2 other racetracks that are Greyhound racetracks, Mardi Gras in Kanawha County outside of Charleston, and Wheeling Island, and Wheeling, which used to be a thoroughbred track, and then was a trotter track, and now is a greyhound track. And so Wayne Clark, my colleague here, and Bill Ridenauer, and the Eastern Panhandle Caucus in the House, they were it was a good team effort there. But to the bill itself, it does 3 major things for the thoroughbred industry in West Virginia. The first, it creates a certified program similar to Virginia's program. And we had a similar program that this was kind of modeled off of, but we eliminated the provisions that the reason that was sunsetted out. It was called the Razor program. It's still on the books, but it's been sunsetted out. That was a 12-month residency requirement. And they were eligible to participate in the restricted races as well as the restricted stakes races, and participating in the breeders' incentives. And the reason that phased out is because a lot of folks thought that was unfair. If they're not actually a West Virginia bred or sire, that they shouldn't participate in the stakes races nor in the breeders' incentives. And so that was phased out. But on the other hand, there's, it's not just West Virginia used to have 900 foals annually, and that's down to about 300 or so. That's kind of a national issue. I think with the Great Recession in 2008, significantly exacerbated. Used to have 40,000 foals born a year. Now it's under 20,000. So there's been some less horses available to race. And so in order to the main purpose of it is essentially to increase investment and employment opportunities in West Virginia's thoroughbred industry. And there's so the certified program has a 6 months residency requirement to begin the certification process. You have to do it before they turn 3. So January 1 of the third year, in effect. So if you wanted to get a 2-year-old certified this year, you would have to get begin the certification before June 30th. We've put an effective date on it for the certification process is May 1st. So that's coming up here in a couple of weeks. So there's an opportunity to get certified in that window for 2 years of this year, and then each year thereafter. And that's up to the West Virginia Thoroughbred Breeders Association and the Racing Commission of how they're going to structure that going forward. So the benefit of the certified program is you're allowed to run in the restricted West Virginia overnight regular races. You're not it's specifically not authorized for the stakes races, the West Virginia accredited stakes races, or the Breeders' Classics, nor are they eligible for the breeder owner incentives. But it's significant because the way that we have it here is your West Virginia and Mountaineer, for the most part, in the condition book, your West Virginia races don't count against your conditions in the open races. So you can get through your maiden, your never won 2, you never won 3, you never won 4, West Virginia, and then you're eligible for the never won 2 open again, and never won 3 open again, never won 4. So there's potentially an additional 4 lifetime condition races that you would be eligible for as a West Virginia certified. And that's the incentive, because and that's part of the reason we increased the cap at Mountaineer from that's the next thing. There is no cap on the certified purses, or the West Virginia restricted purses at Charlestown. That cap was lifted many years ago. And then at Mountaineer, it's a $1 million cap. And I think there's only been a couple of years it's actually hit that cap. But just because with an increase of West Virginia certifieds, you're going to see more. So we increased that cap to $2 million at Mountaineer. That's the other thing this bill does. And then the final thing it does is it restructures the funding formula for the West Virginia Thoroughbred Development Fund. It was initially the initial funding source was 7% of the parimutuel export handle. That was the original one, but the bulk of the Thoroughbred Development Fund comes from the 1.5% of the racetrack video lottery. And up until this bill passed, prior, the 4 racetrack video lotteries, 1.5% would go into a combined pool and then be apportioned 50% to the West Virginia Thoroughbred Development Fund, and then to the 50% to the Greyhound Development Fund. But Charlestown was contributing significantly more, so there was about 1.3 million coming from the Charlestown's 1.5% that was going into the Greyhound Development Fund. That will now stay at Charlestown. Their 1.5% at Charlestown will stay for the Thoroughbred Development Fund, in the same amount near, it was about 200,000 based off of last year's numbers. So in effect, it's going to increase the West Virginia Thoroughbred Development Fund about 30% based off of last year's numbers. So it's kind of threefold of, let's bring these horses here, let's help fill these races. Increase investment, at our farms and with our trainers through the certified program, also and provide more incentive by increasing the development fund so we can breed more horses here. And I think it's going to have a significant impact. These were two of the top these were the top 2 priorities for the stakeholders between the HPPAs and the West Virginia Thoroughbred Breeders Association. So very happy to got this past the finish line. Really thankful for Governor Morrissey for signing this bill. He had a ceremony and bill signing at the racetrack last week, and it was during training hours. So we got the horses training in the background, and one of the I think it was a 2-year-old dropped a rider there, so we had the loose horse warning on the background. So it was pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as everybody's okay at the end of it, it's
Yeah, it wasn't anything major, so just
yeah.
right past the wire. He bucked the jockey off, and he didn't go. He was just jogging afterwards, and the outrider got him.
Babies being babies. I'm curious. You guys are now the third state in this region to have a certified program. Delaware was the first one, then Virginia a few years ago. But an interesting thing to me is like Delaware never really had much of an indigenous breeding program, and at the time that Virginia added it, it didn't have any racing, so its breeding program was sort of dying on the vine. You guys are, I think, the first state with that has a robust racing program and still a pretty active breeding, is still a pretty active breeding state to add a certified program. Was there any concern that it might cannibalize some of your existing West Virginia breds, or encourage people to breed in a different state and then just come by for 6 months? Or was the feeling that this will mostly be additive?
Well, there's trade-offs with anything in life, and I think there were some of those concerns, but at the end of the day, I think look, everyone, if
nobody knows,
everyone would
right?
love to run in a one-horse race with their own horse, right? But at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for the greater good of the industry.
Right.
And by, it's a strange situation where increasing competition is actually more fruitful for the industry over the long term. And so this is one way to and you used to never have to worry about these traditional lifetime condition races, no matter if it's the bottom or mid-level claimers or the allowance races, or your twos and your threes and your fours. 90% of the time they pretty much go, and the last year plus it's been a little there hasn't been that stability of getting these races to go, and the condition book has done a very admirable job. The condition book committee and Charlie, the racing secretary and director of racing, have done a good job where they will put like races kind of clustered the day before, the day after, where if one of them doesn't go, like for example, you'll do an A other than or a two, and then the next day you'll do an A other than, and then the next day maybe do a three, in case the one doesn't go, at least you have a similar pool of horses where you can try and get one of those races to fill. Yeah. So, everyone, that's, I used to be on the HPPA board for 12 years. And prior to that, I was on the Jefferson County Farmland Protection Board. And that's the top concern for everyone is, why isn't my race going? But, my philosophy was always, do every condition at every level, at every level, at every distance, and on a fair and rotating basis. And if they go, they go. If they don't, it's not the fault of the condition book committee that they didn't put the race in. Now there's a timing aspect which people have concerns about. Well, do you do it every 3 weeks or every 4 weeks? Bring them back, and some races go more than others, of course. So they take that to consideration. But there is a sheet there at the HPPA office where if anyone wants the racing, the condition book committee to consider a race, you write it down. And that was one of the first things I did as a board member is, just make sure that people have a vehicle to make sure that their proposed race, if it's not in the book, that there's for all the trainers and owners and everybody, they have a form there that they can put out before the condition book committee when they meet there. Mm-hmm. But this is following up off of, also last year we passed a bill to restore the 10% cut that took place in 2014 called the haircut bill, which was and that helps both the development fund and the purses to the tune of about $3.6 million. So that was important as well. That's part of the reason Charlestown and Mountaineer both raised purses 10 to 17% since that bill became effective last I think it was early summer. So that's significant. And Governor Patrick Morrisey mentioned it, that it's our duty to protect and promote and propel this industry and forward. And that's part of the legislative intent of the racetrack video lottery and the racetrack table games bill, is to protect and promote the industry and the green space and the agriculture and tourism economy. So with what last year's bill and then now this year's bill, we've gotten three of the top priorities for the industry, and really hope that we've set a foundation here and stability where we can, people will have the confidence to invest and make sure this industry is on the upswing.
You said something. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, just back to your certified cannibalization concern. I don't think so. I think it's more complementary. And that was there were some concerns, of whether there's increased competition, it's going to be harder to win a restricted race. But on the other hand, would you rather have increased competition or your race not go?
Right. Yeah. Right.
So that's why I think the folks that represent these organizations, ultimately supported it, and I think it'll be good for the industry. And maybe, hey, someone gets certified here, they'll start breeding here as well. They'll see the other side of that.
Right. So just to recap, for the certified horses, 6 consecutive months of residency prior to their 3-year-old year. And then they're eligible for West Virginia bred races in general, but not for stakes and not for Breeders' Classics.
Correct. And the one caveat on the 6-month residency, there is a 30-day grace provided to travel to and from a sales company or a veterinarian. And they're going to use my understanding is the West Virginia Thoroughbred Breeders Association, who's in charge of the registry, and the Racing Commission oversees them, is they are going to use the same inspector that they use for the breeders.
Okay. Got it. You said something a minute ago I want to grab onto, because it's so important in the breeding business. I've been talking with a lot of breeders in Maryland recently, and you use the word confidence. Like, it's so important, and you know this from growing up in the industry. For somebody to breed a horse, you breed now, it's 11 months till you have a foal, assuming the mare catches, then at least another couple years before they can race, and maybe 3 or even more years before they can race. So you're just eating expenses for years, and you've got to be confident that there's going to be a place for you to run at the end of that and races for you to run in. Talk to that point a little bit.
To maybe some of your listeners that aren't as knowledgeable about the industry, that's totally the name of the game is the purses and the breeders' incentives. That's what makes the sport flow, and the investments, in terms of all the expenses, like you talked about. If you're breeding to race, you're talking 3 to 5 years before you have an opportunity to earn a return on your investment at the track, if you're not going to the sales or things like that. So, and we saw that in 2014. There was a significant pullback after that haircut bill, and that there was a lot of folks that had been breeders here and invested here, and a lot of them went elsewhere after that, because they saw that we thought it was never a guaranteed amount, but this was a very long history here of how these activities were allowed to be here at the racetracks and through countywide referendums, and so felt that was that people have invested, they've bought farms, built farms, and all sorts of ancillary activities. There was a study, let's see here, in 2022, or was it in 2023, based on 2022 numbers, the economic impact of the thoroughbred horse racing industry in West Virginia. there were 303 combined race days, pari-mutuel wagering $451 million in 2022, 5,142 workers. But when you combine it all together, the estimated total impact of the thoroughbred horse racing industry, which includes direct, indirect, and induced effects, was $909 million, 10,780 jobs. And then it breaks it down to horseman expenditures, racetrack, casino operations, and visitor spending. And that's been one of our calling cards. Jefferson County. It goes back to Charles Washington days. Charles Washington was George Washington's brother, and it was first. You look at the newspapers of the times, and the 1780s that they were racing horses down Main Street. But that was when we were part of Virginia, and then of course now we're West Virginia, and West Virginia authorized horse racing wagering in 1933, and we are the biggest tourism county in the state because of our proximity by dollars spent and so on and so forth. And really, it's the racetrack, casino, Charlestown and Harpers Ferry are the two anchors. Sure. But that has been our we have a convention and visitors bureau called the Jefferson County CVB, and their catch slogan is "Where almost heaven begins," and I like to call it the gateway to West Virginia to our neighbors in the DMV. And so it's one of the things that bring people here, and then they can go to Harpers Ferry, the various festivals, all the different other restaurants and attractions we have here, and it's really. It's home. This is, what I was saying in my election. This is Jefferson County is my hill to die on. This is, where I've lived, and beautiful place, and this is certainly a part of that. This industry.
Yeah, you went to Shepherd, right, for your undergrad?
I did, yes. Political science and history, and then I went to W Law School, and I'm an attorney.
When did you decide? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask when you decided that you would become an attorney as opposed to, say, managing the farm, or when did you sort of move in that direction? What sort of triggered with you that said, I go here?
Yeah, I thought about it, and that's part of the reason I did political science, because I always thought I've heard that was good. I've always had sort of the political bug, and at Shepherd, and I ended up taking a year off after I graduated Shepherd, and I was working as an assistant trainer actually at the racetrack, and my brother was managing the farm and didn't really know exactly. I didn't apply to law school immediately, and so I applied for law school while I was taking that year off. I only applied to WVU, and because the tuition was about 3 to 4 times cheaper, in state than any other alternative.
Sure.
And so I got on the wait list, and I went down to the Caribbean with the vacation, and ended up meeting this guy who worked for a big pharmaceutical sales company, and he offered me a job, and I was, we'd met over a few days at the resort, and they said, definitely call me when you get back and we'll get it all sorted out. And the day I got back, the day after I got back, that morning, I got a phone call from the W Law School and said, "Hey, you got in off the wait list." So I thought that was a sign I should probably, even I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in the law, but I figured that was a sign I should probably go to law school. So that's what I did. And part of the inspiration, actually, there was another racing related issue where, my father had some, had his some issues where sort of the racing commission had threatened his license because he called them in his, he has both the personal capacity and his capacity. He was president of the HPPA at the time, but
Right.
we had the farm had a very good horse called Confucius Say at the time. And the big race here at the time was called the Charlestown Dash. And there was another horse who was in Delaware who was entered in the race. And under the rules in Delaware at the time, he had a vet scratch. And if you had a vet scratch within 5 days, you couldn't run. And so he alerted the racing commission to this fact, and that by the rules, the horse shouldn't have been allowed to enter because he had a vet scratch. And so they ended up scratching him. But this was all after the fact, and there were some retaliatory things, and ended up getting an arbiter, because the timing, I think, of this was no coincidence, because the farm had another horse at the time called Julie B, and Confucius Say was the favorite in the Breeders' Classics, and then Julie B was the favorite in the Cavada that year, and just procedurally, they'd suspended his license, so he wouldn't have been able
run those horses.
to run those. So went to the courts, got an injunction, got an arbiter, and ended up prevailing that he didn't abuse his capacity of the president of the HPPA by letting the racing commission know that somebody else violated the rules.
Right. Now, Confucius said
that kind of that thing, that there's other things that I was like, being an attorney, it's just problem solving. You're helping people solve their problems, and I always consider myself a farmer first, and a lawyer, and now a reluctant politician.
Do you think horsemen in general kind of get or the importance of like kind of the political aspect of things, in terms of, so much of like purses at Charlestown and everywhere are dependent on, political decisions that are made?
I think some do. I think some are just they're focused on their business and operations, and don't really want to be bothered with anything else. So it just depends. I think the folks that have been in it for a while, they understand that these decisions that are made at the state, and even now at the national, the federal level with HISA, that was another thing that was we're thrilled to work with Governor Patrick Morrisey. He was then Attorney General, where we went to him, and he worked with his colleague in Louisiana, and we had an injunction against HISA, Louisiana and West Virginia. That was 6 years ago. And it would have cost Jim Miller, who's the president of the HPPA now, he did the math. Had we not got that injunction, it would have cost West Virginia $20 million in purses so far over those 6 years.
That's a lot of dollars. Holy smokes.
That has a lot of those decisions made in Congress and in the state houses are the industry exists because of legislation. That's just a fact. Right. And so, I can't really speak for everyone and anyone else. Some folks are more knowledgeable than others.
Do you have any sense of how your West Virginia's lawsuit with HISA, how that how that's going to play out over the next period of time?
We'll see. It's a permanent injunction as far as I know, until the Supreme Court takes it up to resolve the circuit split between the 5th and the 3rd and the 6th now. Churchill Downs just was successful in a federal district court over the fee issues. So it's a very strange issue, the way that this was crafted in a must-pass bill, a few years ago, whenever it was enacted. I guess it was 6 years now.
It was during COVID, right?
Because you have this private regulatory body that under the rubric of the FTC, and it was challenged, and then the year after it was challenged, Congress, because I think maybe it was the Fifth Circuit, I forgot which federal court said, hey, this is unconstitutional. You have this private entity that has no federal, accountability.
Mhm.
And so what they did, because they could just make up their own rules and no one had to approve them or deny them. And so that was one of the arguments used and successful in one of the federal courts. And so the next year after this passed, after the federal courts struck it down as unconstitutional, they amended it by saying the FTC can approve or deny the rulemaking process. But
Mhm.
it's still constitutionally suspect for a number of other reasons, and that's what the litigators, and that's why the Fifth Circuit agreed so far with the national HPPA and which the Charlestown HPPA and Louisiana HPPA and a number of other folks or parties to on this injunction.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we'll see what happens. But as far as I know, the Sixth Circuit has said it's constitutional. The Fifth Circuit hasn't, and generally the way these things work is when there's a circuit split, it's got to go to the Supreme Court to decide.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting. You brought up the Churchill Downs suit, and I saw a lot of people like on social media who are against his saying, sort of wahoo, we beat HISA. I think most tracks are not going to be happy with that resolution because the initial way that HISA was calculating what everybody owed it was based in part on days and in part on purses. Now that's only going to be based on days, which means smaller tracks are going to have to cough up more money, which isn't, in general, for the industry, isn't going to work very well for a lot of tracks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super familiar with the formula and how they assess it, but there's obviously legitimate complaints there of and that was one of the complaints in the Louisiana case that were being unfairly assessed. And it's basically this duplicative regulatory structure because you still have the state racing commissions and they're doing the work and there's a lot of collaboration agreements between them and HISA. And, I think HISA is well intentioned. There's some conventions there of having uniformity, but I think that was being done through the RMTC or what is it?
Yeah, the RMTC,
Associations of racing,
MEA,
RCI, Racing
RCI, yeah,
Commission Internationals,
right.
which each state is a member of, and it wasn't perfect, but this was his. I think part of it was PR, and there was a number of motivations. I think there's some well-intentioned things, but it's an unfunded mandate at the end of the day, and frankly, that's the most egregious part. If Congress is going to go and force everyone to have this duplicative regulatory structure, and because of their law, but yet they're passing the buck back to the states of funding the law that they passed, and that's just egregious. And whether it's constitutional or not, Congress
Mhm.
should not be pushing unfunded mandates onto the states.
Is that what you see as the core issue?
That's one of them. I mean, you have all the other constitutional issues, the rulemaking process of I think some things are moving in the right directions in terms of the uniformity and things like that. But there's due process issues. But at the end of the day, I think it would be much better received if it wasn't an unfunded mandate.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a lot of money coming out of the industry to do
What
something
is
that.
their budget, like 80 million a year or something?
Yeah,
And
I think it's close to it. Yeah,
and there's no, it's they get to create their own budget. This private entity that heretofore, before this legislation, had never been involved with horse racing.
yeah, yeah. No, it's you're exactly right on all those things. All right. So O'Sullivan Farms, you said oldest breeding farm in the state. You guys are standing 4 stallions right now. My Prankster, I think, was the busiest stallion in West Virginia in 2025 in terms of mares covered. Also, you have Cross Traffic, who you're standing in Virginia, which I thought was interesting. He had at least one Eclipse champion Cross Traffic and Jaywalk, which which I think was his first crop. Good stuff happening there.
Just to clarify one point, it is my family's farm that I grew up on, but I do not have any ownership, of the farm. My brother manages the farm, and Wells and my mother, so it's their farm really. Just for clarification, but I'm their neighbor, and I certainly my brother knows all the numbers. I don't even know the numbers. How many they bred last year or this year? He's the manager, so he can tell you that. But as my understanding was that he worked a deal and got cross traffic, and he's staying in Virginia now. And that's one of the things that a number of folks have been doing, particularly when the Virginia Certified program first started, where you could get Virginia certified and be a West Virginia bred, and you get more opportunities, earning opportunities that way. And then in Virginia, they excluded West Virginia after a certain point because so many folks were doing it, the eligibility there. But that's just with the certified program. Now in Virginia, they're I think there's only maybe a dozen Virginia breds every year, and maybe not many more sired. So I think this is as a good opportunity where there'll be more Virginia bred and more Virginia sired. And then again, instead of competition, there's collaboration where you could say, okay, what's a Virginia sired? You're Fulham in West Virginia. He's a West Virginia bred, Virginia sired, and you can go get Delaware certified, or the amount of racetracks and racing states in the Mid-Atlantic, there's no equal for the rest of the country. So there's an opportunity to collaborate. You're seeing that between Maryland and Virginia. I think that's been an ongoing conversation where I don't think Laurel is going to compete with Colonial Downs meet this year, or at least for the most part, except for Tamunia maybe. I think that's an ongoing conversation. West Virginia, we kind of, we're doing our own thing, and I think we don't have the biggest purses or the biggest development funds, but we have we race 3 to 4 races a day, about 160 race days a year, and it's our purses are getting better, and it's a good. These are hardworking folks, and there's an opportunity to earn there where you're not necessarily, and we're upgrading our stock as well. We're seeing some horses that are being able to compete, in open stakes and graded stakes. Coastal Mission being one of them recently. Jeff Runco's horse, and so it's a focus on quality over quantity now.
Yeah, we've definitely seen some a little bit higher end breeding from some West Virginia breds in recent years. The other thing that's interesting, you talk about like cross traffic. He's in Virginia, your farm's in West Virginia. This is a thing I'm hearing a lot from people, like this sort of cross border cooperation in the Mid-Atlantic, where, as you said, we've got so many tracks in such a small area. The more kind of collaboration there can be among state bred associations and horsemen and racetracks throughout the region, that should benefit us all if we do it right.
Well, I think we're competing for in some ways, but there's collaboration in others. Our Governor Patrick Morrisey, back to his agendas, he's calling it the economic backyard brawl. We have the backyard brawl was named after the WU Pitt rivalry, right. And for many years, and so we've seen West Virginia was one of the first states to have the Racino model along with Delaware, and now you've seen Maryland and Pennsylvania and Ohio have come on board, and we're competing for those folks, and but not just the thoroughbred industry, but energy sector and all sorts of investment, for in other industries. So you try and create a climate that there's stability, that it encourages investment, and as much as we can make it collaborative. I think that was my intent, and not to just to make the program stronger. And so you've seen other. I'm not sure on some of the tracks have this jail thing where you can't, you claim a horse and you can't race at another track. I'm not sure if that's necessarily healthy. But I think you need to be, people need opportunities to earn. And so we're trying to make West Virginia a good place to invest in, where, which increases employment and in our business community.
All right. I think that's probably a good place to leave it, Joe. Thank you very much for joining me here on Charlestown Races Today.
You bet, Frank. Well, thank you for everything you do and covering West Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
I will. Not going to let you go that easily. That was Joe Funkhouser, Delegate Joe Funkhouser, a member of the Funkhouser family, which owns O'Sullivan Farms in Charlestown, and a prominent breeding family, as well as a delegate who helped push legislation that should significantly benefit the thoroughbred industry in West Virginia, and particularly West Virginia breeding industry in the years to come. I'm Frank Vespi. You've been listening to Charlestown Races Today, powered by the Racing Biz, the racingbiz.com, presented by our friends at Charlestown Races, Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. Please like and subscribe. You can do that at Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. We appreciate that very much. And we will be back later this week with more Charlestown Races Today. Take care, everybody. Talk to you soon.